G'day and welcome to the Off-Chain Podcast. Don here with you. Our guest today is Boris Bohrer-Bilowitzki, CEO of Concordium, the compliance-ready Layer 1 PayFi blockchain, who, in partnership with Ledger, is enabling one-click verify and pay functionality. We've been waiting for this for a very long time in crypto. Here it is. The first hardware wallet integration bringing protocol-level identity verification to everyday payments. For example, buying your coffee from your wallet using stablecoins with the easy use of Google or Apple Pay. Super exciting, right? We're excited to talk about what this means for bringing stablecoin payment utility to the masses, why privacy matters, and how this partnership is about taking on Google and Apple Pay, Visa, Mastercard at their own payments game. Very interesting conversation. Let's dive in. What's your origin story, and tell us a bit about the inspiration for Concordium?
Sure. So first and foremost, thank you for having me on. The origin story. So I'm from Liechtenstein, a very little place. I grew up in this private banking and wealth sector, which was like asset management sector, which was extremely boring. You know, double-breasted suits, MS ties, and lunches that go till 4 p.m. I then was in Vienna. I started a retail equity brokerage company, which I then exited. I actually came to London to open a restaurant, of all things. Thank God that actually fell through. Went back into asset management, and that was like around 2016, 17. And then kind of caught the bug about crypto. And got to know a friend of mine that we basically had like, you know, pre-Christmas lunches and stuff like this. And then he said, I've got an idea in order to build an institutional custodian, which in, 2018, late 17, 18 was very early because there were no institutions in the space. Yeah, so, sure. and that became, so was like, okay, come on, man, let's go. And that became Copper. One of the largest custodians and prime infrastructure providers in the world. Been doing that for I was the chief commercial officer, so I orchestrated, led, and implemented the entire commercial strategy for the firm, all the way up to its Series C. The company became quite big and extremely corporate, which is not necessarily something that I enjoy. We hired a ton of ex-bankers that really enjoy that type of stuff. I'm more like the guy that likes to build things, and Concordium was a logical move for me. It was actually originally founded by Lars Christensen, the co-founder and CEO of Saxo Bank for 20 years. I think he was the CEO there. Was also early on in crypto, and he kind of saw if we would like to see real world adoption, we need to strike a balance between the core of what crypto is built on, which is complete and utter anonymity, but the regulatory side will not go away, and as somebody that has built a bank, he understood that. Started Concordium in like 17 actually, with some of the best cryptographers in the world, the likes of Ivan Damgard, Torben Pritz Pedersen, like those guys. And actually Concordium became a client of Copper in 2022. And that's how I first got in touch with him, with Lars specifically. And I, at the same time, 22, 23, when we had like the systemic infrastructure crash, if you want to call it like this, with like Genesis and FTX and everything that happened, I asked myself quite a lot of questions because I very much believed in the very first line of the Satoshi white paper. And that's like global electronic peer-to-peer cash. Granted, Bitcoin went down a different route. It currently also is going down a different route, interestingly. Sure. But what it ultimately came down to is that it was clear to me that the compliance angle is not something, and the regulatory angle is not something that you can just disregard. And striking a balance between privacy preservation, but still upholding the core ethos of what crypto actually stands for, was a logical way. So I kind of came in, left Copper, which was a difficult decision because it's like your baby and everything else. Then took over as the CEO in September last year, 2024, and completely remodeled the project. And we can talk about in a lot more detail with regards to what exactly we've done here. And are starting to get some real traction. that's basically the origin story. I deep down, I'm an absolute cypherpunk, but I also am a realist, and I realize that there is no way for you in order to, rock up in a world suddenly and the regulator going like, you know what, KYC and AML is like, let's forget it. Let's just go. Yeah, don't worry about it. Let's just go for our life.
So we all thought that back in 2017. We all thought, don't worry about it. No, regulators like to care about us.
Yeah, let's build some cool shit and we'll just happen. But interestingly, I've sat on so many panels over the years, all over the world, and there was always this one or two guys that are sitting there on the in a very convincing way trying to explain to people that on a random Sunday in 2 years time you're going to sit in your underwear in front of a laptop and draw a new mortgage for a house. And it's like, mate, this is just not going to happen. I hope eventually, but there are certain steps that we need to do in order to get to that point, and that's basically what we're trying to solve here at Concordium.
Yeah, man. We've got a lot of viewers and listeners who are on the founder journey, or entrepreneurs at least. How do you? I'm thinking about, you build something from scratch, you see it grow, you hire into it, it continues to grow, it becomes one of the kind of pillars of the whole ecosystem, really. How can you talk us through your mindset as you're thinking through actually leaving there and going and joining something nascent or something that's kind of on the rise or looking for a future?
I mean, I think the hardest thing is to kind of compute at what speed it all happened. I think that was the hardest thing to compute, because you start in a shitty flat in Shoreditch with 4 or 5 guys, and you pin papers against the wall, and then suddenly you're 500 people at a multi-billion-dollar valuation, right, with a completely global footprint, and you're being seen as kind of systemic. Do you see what I mean?
Sure.
You're in all the chat rooms and on crypto Twitter and then on LinkedIn, because we were only institutional, we didn't touch retail. So it's oh God, if something happens to copper, we're really screwed in the space. So it's that was really something to kind of compute, and was it's a very humbling experience. I think that's the best way to put it. Because you're being entrusted with billions of dollars, and there is a heavy burden of responsibility. And like anything, when it comes to business, you also feel an incredible responsibility to the people that you employ, and the wider, their families that you support. Suddenly it's you have some sort of a responsibility for thousands, tens of thousands of people in the wider circle.
Yeah.
And that was something that was hard to compute, but at the same time, it's not necessarily a great feeling. It's you kind of go through the motions, and it becomes very clear to you that you either are a builder or you are an operator.
Mm-hmm.
So there is the operational side of things. There are people that absolutely enjoy this and are great at it. And then on the other side, there are the people that want to have this raw feeling again. And I kind of wanted to have that raw feeling again of getting something out there and trying to convince people. I've always been a salesman my entire life. I'm here also at Concordium. I'm a commercial CEO. I'm not a technical CEO. It's maybe a personal trait of mine, sitting in a room and people look at you and go what is this asshole wanting to sell me now? I really get off on this. I really enjoy that.
Uh-huh.
So it's for me was more at the time, joining Concordium was kind of the calling card with regards to actually making a difference. We sit there and we pride ourselves that crypto is wherever we are right now after everything going down, but it's a $3 trillion situation. But at the end of the day, it's 20 million plus cryptos that are hanging around out there. A lot of them have absolutely zero value, but have 3-digit million market caps. And you kind of ask yourself the question, why we didn't see, because the technology has been around for a long time, but you kind of boil it down to very simplistic concepts, which one of the core ones for me is that that innovation happens so quickly, and there are new and more exciting things if we think about DeFi, but they're extremely complex. And if you think of your auntie or your parents or your cousin that are not in crypto, and you need to sit there and try to explain to them what a mnemonic seed phrase is and public addresses and private keys, and like, people are just switching off. And the matter of the fact for me is that I believe that the core use case for crypto, and I'm not necessarily talking about buying you coffee at the corner shop, right? That's fine as well, but should be in and around payments, because payments make the world go round. Any interaction there is like an exchange of goods and service for what you would consider money, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is the core of any financial transaction in any shape or form, quite frankly. Interestingly, we haven't seen that adoption, right? People are kind of, how should I say? They are somewhat misguided and in their belief that, just because Paolo and Tether is now $200 billion in TVL, that's, we won. It's like, no, we didn't, because it's not being used day to day. So for me, the tooling, i.e., understanding that 99.99% have no idea from the horrendous process that happens behind the scenes once you do tap at your pret to buy your coffee, all the way to the most complex equity, investment banking and trading transactions that need like 2-3 days to settle, because there is a armada of people on Wall Street or in Canary Wharf here in London that have a horrible job of chasing empty 500 messages and trying to settle that damn thing that happened 2-3 days before. Surely there is a better way to do it, but people don't understand that that's what happens behind the scenes. They just blindly trust. And that for me is exactly where I would like to have blockchain go, under the premise of blockchain needing to be used rather than understood. And everybody is trying to understand it, which is one of the main reasons of why we haven't seen the adoption. And you need to solve for a lot of things, which we can talk about, of like what we're doing here at Concordium.
Yeah, for sure, man. The whole regulatory environment is probably one of those reasons as well. Not even that. I remember, again, if I cast my mind back to even 2017, 18, you mentioned Tether. I remember, the crash of 2018, thinking, where can you go? Because can't trust Tether. Don't want to get out of crypto. Nothing, like nowhere else to go. And it turns out Tether is still here and going very strong and becoming more and more legitimate, I would say. And other stablecoins becoming very legitimate and utilized. Why do you think we're still not seeing them being utilized outside of people who are maybe crypto natives?
Because the use case is missing. It's actually quite simple. Look, let's break it down. Let's look at the stablecoin, or maybe let's take a first look at the regulatory side of things, right?
Sure.
Regulators. Their sole purpose is in order to protect retail. And they're doing a relatively bad job at it because they constantly lag behind fast waves of innovation.
Yeah,
right?
necessarily are. Yeah.
Now things are and things are starting to move in different jurisdictions also for different reasons. Stablecoins specifically are a relatively easy concept if you kind of think of it. And suddenly, if you think of America, it has a geopolitical reason, right? Because like everybody has been talking about de-dollarization for a long time. If you're able to adopt this first, you lock a load of liquidity into the USD. And that makes a lot of sense. Now, which is where I'm saying, like, things do make sense, meaning that you have adoption in some shape or form. Now, let's have a look at the Genius Act, right? Genius Act, great idea. Everybody is waiting for clarity, and we will have to see if the elephant once again beats the donkey or not. But at the end of the day, those are frameworks that you can operate under. Because everybody has been trying to, argue to try to fit a square peg through a round hole, which is not going to work, right?
Yeah.
The true nature of this industry is not something that fits into existing frameworks. To a certain extent, there are some overarching principles that are going to be the same, but if you really want to go and see adoption, that's a different story altogether. Now, stablecoins itself, I think that's a very, very important and interesting point, right? You have Tether, and to a certain extent, Jeremy with his circle. Now, there is a reason why Jeremy has a very hard time to kind of compete with Paolo, because it's kind of a Red Bull. I'm always referring to the Red Bull example. Red Bull has been the first one, so you can try, get as many monsters out there as you want, but you never get as big as Red Bull. You've got a first mover advantage. Now, with that in mind, you kind of have to look at the use cases, right? And it's 3/4. The first one is for the complete new group of retail users, etc., that are basically coming to the space and are buying a couple of Satoshis on Binance with USDT, because that's the pair, right? And it allows you, in order to move, if you're like a little bit more sophisticated and you also have a Kraken account, it's easy to move the money from left to right, right? Even though also there you've got the regulatory problems in and around travel rule, etc. But we can cover that because we've got a full end-to-end solution for that. So the second cohort of people is the more sophisticated ones, which are, they use stables for as collateral for their derivatives positions. So you're a little bit more advanced than just buying spot. And the third one is this hardcore crypto native crowd that basically does some very funky stuff, some down deep in some DeFi rabbit holes in around money Lego and yield farming and God knows what. And then there is the /4, which is people just doing things because of the fiat system that they currently live in completely and utterly sucks.
Sure.
Think of Nigeria, think of Argentina, where you can actually go to a corner shop and pay with USDT for your newspaper, right? Now, that part is, of course, the piece that is not regulated. But we're now talking about USDT, right? Even Circle has a hard time in order to compete. And even though they go down the route of the more compliant one, even they don't manage to do it, because that pie, that crypto native pie, is extremely well distributed, right? But the main issue is that if you look at the top 50 or the top 70, everybody fights over that same pie. Nobody figures out really of how to look over here and go like, holy moly, here is a far bigger pie that we could go after.
Make the pie bigger.
But the matter of fact is the way that they have built their tech stack does not allow in order to operate in a compliant way, or it does scale, right? Because scalability, if you think of like every single remittance transactions or you actually buying your coffee at Pret, that requires quite a lot of throughput and everything else. But what I mean there is those are big battleships now, and I'm talking about the Ethereums and Solanas, etc. Those are very big battleships that are ruling a world which is not necessarily applicable in the real world. Eventually, maybe, but the question is if they have the breadth in order to stay alive that long. Now, on the other side of the coin, you have all those wonderful different stablecoin projects. And I'm stepping now away from Tether and Circle. Think of wonderful things like tokenized money market funds. Think of Biddle. Think of Ondo, Hashnode, Benji. Things that actually generate you a yield, which is completely the opposite of what actually fiat money does, because every single second, every minute, every hour, every day, every week, every month, it declines in value. That's what it does, right? So if you can figure out a use case for those guys, whereas also solving for the regulatory and compliance related issues, which are the ones that ultimately will gear towards adoption. Because let's face it, as long as you still need people that have to sit through KYC documents and not having a secondary market because of it, you won't see, that's the reason why you don't see a Biddle BTC pair on Binance, right?
Yeah.
That's the reason why. So apart from the regulatory side of things of it being a security, et cetera, so there's a lot of like a cascading ladder of problems. But projects that would like to access that, just like Concordium does, you need to build a different tech stack. And we have struck that balance very, very well. And like I say, it's not necessarily in around the sole purpose of projects like Concordium is that we are trying to get a new cohort of users into a Web3 world. Because right now they do not exist. Everybody has been fighting around for about 3 years now. We are on average, 7.5 million monthly DApp users? It's the same number. There are not new users coming to the party. And you need to ask yourself the question why. And it's got loads of reasons. Regulatory, tooling, tech stack, like the full Monty, right? But if you solve for 2 out of 3, you have a great chance of actually winning. And that's what we do here.
How much of that do you think is AI taking the wind out of blockchain sales?
mean, AI is. Look, I mean, let's go through the buzzwords, right? First, it was the internet, then it was big data, then it was cloud, then it was blockchain. Now it's AI. The next thing is going to be quantum computing. God knows what's going to be afterwards. So anybody who is like a savvy investor of your listeners, just try to buy yourself some equity in some quantum computing firms. You can actually not go wrong. Just put money into it and close your eyes for a couple of years. The AI side is, first and foremost, it happened about as quickly as it did, even though it's been around for a long time, but it happened about as quickly as the blockchain world, right? So a load of money is getting poured in. Everybody is talking about it. But at the end of the day, the core rails is not something that AI can solve for. It's an interaction that you can aid, have a co-CEO in the form of an AI. And instead of you and me talking right now, I could have fed an AI and it's the same fat face, right? But at the end of the day, he would say exactly the same stuff that I would say.
Sure.
So I don't say that it kind of has taken away. Yes, it's just a new investment buzzword on which the world needs to figure out of how to get new capital into new funds that now have an AI focus. We haven't really seen, a blockchain based there are venture funds, but at the end of the day, so, and now with more and more IPOs in around that space, you could basically argue that there is a chance in order for you to get your hands on, outside of VC capital, to get your hands on some liquid blockchain based infrastructure equity, right? So, but I don't see that as the reason of why we haven't moved on at all. If at all, it should actually aid, because it's a new technology, and you find out of how to kind of combine the two. There is capital that can flow your way too. So it's a matter of figuring that out. But as long as we kind of focus on this hardcore DeFi cypherpunk crap, I have to say it's not going to, you won't see that happening.
Do you think there's a silver bullet, or is it just a factor of, like, in terms of PayFi and adoption, is it one thing that's going to change everything, or is it just the slow or grinding or consistent, stable, iterating, building? How are you thinking through this with Concordium? Are you looking for that one big win, or is it just a whole suite of things that need to happen that you're building to make this happen?
It's a very good question. I'm a fan of simplicity, right? And I think there are two core pillars. Like I can only speak to, like, or I would like to mainly speak on, like, what we do at Concordium, right? Number one, there are two core USPs if you think of Concordium in its entire ecosystem. Identity on the protocol layer. Now, what does that mean, right? In the world where we live in right now, and any interaction being digital, you will have found yourself in the position of actually having to onboard to all sorts of different services. And there are, I don't know how many copies of your passport or your driver's license out in the ether with the knowledge of where you live and everything else.
Yeah.
I hate that, right?
Yeah, same.
The idea of having identity on the base layer, on the protocol level, is an interesting one because it opens up a load of opportunities. So what it basically means in Concordium's case, you go through the motion of, like, you download a wallet, you go through the verification once, and once you then start to interact in an ecosystem, you can do it in a fully privacy-preserving way. So your ass and your identity is not bare in the world out there. Meaning, think of the adult content, think of social media, think of gambling, where you have to prove age. Let's take a very simple one, right? Age verification is a big one, and rightly so. Like in the UK, you have got the Online Safety Act, a lot of different countries adopting their own way of doing things. And rightly so, you should prove and have access to content. Just think of your children or anybody else. Sure. You have to be over 15, or you have to be over 16, or over 18, or over 21. But at the same time, I would like to be able to access those services without them knowing my name or where I live. Yeah. Now, what we've done here is that we have implemented we've implemented a way on a zero knowledge proof basis to preserve that privacy of yours. Meaning that you can do transactions on the premise of saying, okay, I would like to access this. And a transaction with regards to the proof either goes through or it doesn't. I can either log in or I cannot. but it doesn't say it's Boris. It doesn't say, it's Joe, it's Jill, whoever else it is. It simply goes like, you are over 18, so you're ready to go. Now, what does that do? And let's basically think of adult content. Let's think of porn, because it's a massive industry globally, right? Everybody, even though they don't like to admit it, are watching it from time to time. But the matter of the fact is now that you're basically going through the motion of having to onboard to those. And there are various ways of how you can do this, right? Number one, you either send them a copy of your passport. Thank you, no. No interest for them to have a copy of my passport.
Sure.
Second of all, you can have what they use right now is like some AI tool. So you have a picture taken of yourself, which can be quite weird in those situations, and then subsequently estimating your age. Or what would you click on as a daily user that is not in the Web3 world? You see a button that says anonymous verification. Like, I would click that button. And that's exactly what Concordium is built, right? So what you suddenly have is a load of users that are living in this Web2 world that are basically going through the motion and learning very simply by abstracting all the complexities away of, like, blockchain is not even being mentioned, right? That's the important thing. Where you basically go through that verification process, it clearly states there is no copy of your passport that lives on chain. Your identity is not on chain. But what basically happens is on your wallet, which is yours, your identity is cryptographically hashed to it. The line items, your name, your address, what kind of document it was. So if you now start to interact, you interact in a full privacy preserving way using zero knowledge proofs. That's basically that, right? Very simple and straightforward. Don't think about trying to flog them to do some yield farming in DeFi and God knows what, right? Don't even talk about it for the time being.
Yeah.
The second part to it is the problematic use case that it has been pushed of smart contracts. Now, again, a thing that you don't necessarily want to explain to your auntie or your parents that have just learned of how to push the button twice on their phone on the side and then tap on a machine and have paid for that. Right? And that even took a month. What I'm talking about is that smart contracts have been pushed down the road due to the fast innovation in the space, rightly or wrongly, to fulfill a custodial function, also when it comes to issuance. And every single hack, every single misappropriation of funds is smart contract based. Nobody hacked the protocol because of its decentralized nature. Now, with regards to the next buzzword on quantum computing, there's something that projects need to think about quite dramatically because it's a real problem. But what I'm saying there is that for me, and I do know a thing or two about custody, a smart contract is great in order to enforce conditionality. It should not act as a custodian for funds because of one specific reason. And that one specific reason is the time value of money, which I'm going to come back to. But ultimately, what it is, it's just a honeypot risk that you do not want to have. More importantly, with any big institution that during my time at Copper specifically, all the biggest banks in the world, even though the front end trade, the front office traders and sales guys go like, yeah, let's go crypto, there is money to be made. The guy that ultimately calls the shots is the chief risk officer and the chief compliance officer. Without them going like, okay, we're ready to go, nothing will happen. And I think that's one of the most important ones because, Ethereum, Solana, all those projects have been around for a long time. Did anybody ask themselves the question why they haven't been adopted by those guys? Like that technology is, battle tested.
Sure.
But now we see that everybody needs to try to build their own chain, right? Why? So for me, the answer is very, very simple because from a scalability issue, you cannot go down that route. And everything is smart contract based specifically when it comes to issuance. Now let's talk about payments, right? Because there are two ways that you can do payments. Either you trust me on the first of every month to send you $100 and me pushing a button, or I'm going to put $1,200 into a smart contract, and 1 second after midnight on the first of every month, it sends you $100. But while the money is sitting there, so you don't want to take both because we constantly pride ourselves of like a trustless world, right? Which it is not. So on that premise, the time value of money comes in. So where Stripe is doing tempo, right? And rightly so, because they've got a distribution network.
Sure.
And go and buy the coffee. Concordium is more thinking of time value of money and the usage of something that bears you a yield. So suddenly the bidders, ondos, and hash nodes, and that's just the first step, right? In theory, you could tokenize anything as long as you and me agree that it has value on a peer-to-peer basis, right? So what I mean there is, thousands of years ago, people were happy in order to give you a chicken for a shell with a hole in it. Then it became precious metals. Then suddenly we were okay with a piece of paper that has a 1 and a 0. But if I have a 1 and a 0 and a 0, I can buy 10 times more things, which is great. The only reason why it works is because you and me agree. So if you now have something like a tokenized money market fund that bears you wherever we are with the interest rates now, 4.5%, 4.25%, and you strip away the necessity of smart contract issuance that allows to fulfill on the core promise of full programmability. How long have we heard like programmable money for ages? But it hasn't been adopted. Again, you should ask yourself the question why. If you can issue that on a protocol level, where you can build in locking functionality, I can actually agree on a peer-to-peer basis, whereby completely disintermediating those traditional institutions in order to do a transaction. Let's do a simple example, right? Rental agreements. You sign a rental agreement, what's the first thing you have to do?
Put up a bond? I'm not sure.
You have to put a security deposit. You have to put a security deposit down, right? Now, this security deposit goes to a bank. The only one that actually makes money is the bank out of that thing, right?
Yeah.
And after 10 years, or after 5 years, you get your $10,000 back. So why? If I have the ability from peer-to-peer with the landlords to basically say, okay, listen, buddy, I have the money, here it is. I'm signing a transaction to you. All you need to have is a wallet. You can monitor 24/7 because and don't go down the route of like complex ledgers and all that kind of stuff. Like literally just go down the route of saying like, here is the money, it's coming your way. And a smart contract in theory, monitoring the fact if you have smashed up the kitchen or not, that money can yield me, right? During that time. Yeah. It's there as a security, but it can yield me. Now, you can boil this down all the way to your DoorDash or Deliveroo order, right? If I'm ordering a pizza on Deliveroo, the very first thing I have to do is pay. If I go to a restaurant and I give the waiter my order, he doesn't whip out the card machine and says, pay now. It's like, is the food arriving? Is it good? Is it cold? Blah, blah, blah. And then I pay. Now, if I use things that bear me a yield, which is where, yield-bearing stablecoins are the important thing here, which is what Concordium builds a use case for. You basically can break into certain verticals that currently and give them a use case which are far bigger than what Tether has right now on Uniswap.
Yeah, right.
Do you see what I mean? So suddenly trade finance is becoming interesting, which is actually something that we have announced with Spyco. I don't know if you know those guys, the biggest tokenized money market fund outside of the US. And we're doing a transaction beginning of next year. Not big, but suddenly, you talk tens of millions of dollars for whatever it is. I think it's medical supplies in Spain. Think of TVL. Do you know how long it takes for a stablecoin to get $25 million worth of TVL or $30 million of TVL through the door?
Yeah.
Or you basically rock up to trade finance people and say, listen, guys, you can now use, all you need to agree on is the peer-to-peer nature. You need to agree on, for example, BlackRock's tokenized money market fund, BIDL, or in this case, Spyco, to be the mean of transfer that you can, within the click of a button, get in and out, also back into fiat. So that means during the duration of that transaction, on an annualized basis, you are making 4.5%, plus you don't need an intermediary anymore in the form of JP Morgan or Citi, which charges you 1.5% annualized. So there is an extra 6% go around the table. How much of this shit are you guys doing per year? $7 billion? 6% is quite a lot.
Oh, yeah.
So suddenly you give those stable coins outside of Tether a use case. And at that point, you get adoption. At that point, you basically drive TVL. At that point, you drive transaction volumes, right? If you think of just, me having to rock up to Aave or to anything and try to beg in order to, issue on Concordium.
Yeah.
I could rock up to Savills and basically say, hey, for your rental agreements from now on, here is an option. And with regards to the mean of transfer, all that people need to agree is that they use something that bears a yield and it's directly linked peer-to-peer. It's still a payment, So those are the two core things that Concordium has, right? ID that allows you in order to be compliant, meaning I want to do an age verification payment because I'm buying a bottle of beer online. On the other side, the full programmability features that the blockchain allows you to do if you issue on a protocol level instead of a smart contract, stripping away the risks of them acting in a custodial function and smart contracts actually being there to enforce conditionality. Kind of makes sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, zero knowledge proof ID and programmable money, for me, have been two of the biggest promises of crypto blockchain for the better part of a decade, right? And they have, I would say, meaningfully existed, although like you've identified, in the past, we're just at the protocol level. I mean, there are some hackability issues, shall we say, but the ZK proof ID stuff, which for me is such a killer use of blockchain, and yet it seems like where is the adoption? If it's such a no-brainer, how come people aren't using it already?
It's a simple answer because nobody built it.
Right.
It's a very simple answer. Like people automatically go like, other projects, but they're all like EVM, out of the Ethereum ecosystem, like layer 2s, but they've got the scalability issue and ultimately still are smart contract based. Yeah. The matter of the fact is that you need to find like the ID on a zero knowledge proof basis is quite simple to build. And quite a few people have done that, right? But it depends on how you're pairing it up. And the protocol level issuance is the thing that ultimately makes it all come together. Because I can make sure, in theory, that a transaction on a programmable basis is only going to people with a wallet that has been proven to be over 18. Now, let's go back to the porn example, right? It's not just for the users in order to come in and enjoy the content. It's also for the people that actually are producing the content, which is even more regulatory constrained than anything else, because you want to make sure that those are people that are over 18. Sure. Now, if I can pay wallets that are over 18, like ultimately you are solving, like it's a win-win-win. Like we got the okay from the regulators and say like, this is the best solution that we've seen. Please go ahead, which you will see quite a lot of news about in the course of the next couple of weeks. So by the time that this comes out, it will already be out, right?
I mean, it strikes me that's the missing piece, has been the regulators kind of tip of the hat or ticking the box of, yes, this is appropriate, this will work, we back this. I think I haven't seen that before, actually.
Well, I mean, look, I don't want to sound like some sort of a conspiracy theorist by any means, but look, as long as you don't piss into some big institution's pond and you actually solve for a big problem, which is, if you think of the adult and gambling industries, that's like billions of dollars and hundreds of millions of users, which now, due to the regulatory side of things in and around the Online Safety Act, have been basically shut down. Those are tax incomes. Those are big, 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 big problems. And it's somebody that nobody wants to really stand up to. And basically, how do you think, like people are so blinded. I find it hilarious because like, how do you think those guys went through doing one of the biggest industries in the world by not being banked by the biggest banks? Nobody, like people are like, I find it really, really interesting and funny because like, excuse me, tier 1 bank, are you banking? Because like we would have an ethical issue with this. Like, and what do they do? Like not talk about, like say no? Like those industries have existed for a long time, but suddenly you've got a problem, which also comes down to a state and government level because there are massive amounts of income and ultimately tax revenues are missing, right? So because of the regulatory, and rightly so, because you should be over 18 in order to interact with that content,
sure.
Right? So for me, it's kind of the wonderful thing about this is if you think about age verification payments in those high risk verticals, they're also the ones that are very first in order to adopt new technologies, simply because they have a hard time in order to get the traditional rails going, right?
Sure.
Because of what they are. So you have been able, in order to pay for adult content or for gambling, online casinos, accept crypto left, right, and center, right?
Yeah, right.
But people now realize there's also the regulators and go like, hold on a second, guys, you have to do this in a compliant way. Entrance Concordium. We can basically prove you, number one, that from a programmability issue, you can geofence things out of the gate without saying where Boris is. But I can basically say, okay, at exactly the same way of what we have a full end-to-end solution for things like the travel rule, an absolute pain in the ass. I remember at the time at Copper, an absolute nightmare. Hundreds of billions of dollars being traded through the infrastructure on a monthly basis. Markets are being volatile and you need to top up margin. And then there is a guy that needs to call up, I'm depositing an extra $5 million in USDT, and they go like, send us a Satoshi test versus like, listen up, pal, I'm getting liquidated here. Shut up with your thing. I need to trade.
Yeah.
Right? But this is a regulator just putting stuff into play in order to create a roadblock without actually thinking or understanding of what the technology can do. Now, again, we have solved for this. So if it's a Concordium issued stablecoin, via a partnership that we have with one of the biggest out there that is basically being used from the infrastructure perspective to do that. You have an end-to-end solution and your deposit goes through immediately because you're automatically travel rule compliant. You can prove provenance of like this wallet belonging to you inadvertently, right? So things like this are just things that haven't been built. So everybody tries to build their own solution in order to cover up a problem, which is massive. But the tech stack hasn't been around. Coming back to the point of like, why was blockchain not adopted already if Ethereum is so great?
Yeah. But why? What's your answer to your own question there?
Because Ethereum is not that great.
Yeah.
Ethereum's great for what it can do in that crypto native world. It's fantastic. It built it from scratch, right? And everybody, and the same with Solana, right? It's great for that.
Sure,
it's not great for that. And that's just a realization that am I saying like, my view has always been that 99% of the projects that you currently see today, are you really asking yourself the question if they're going to be around in 10 years' time? I know I'm stepping on the toes of some big ETH maxis right now, but at the end of the day, if there is no move being done of like everything, like the idea of a smart contract is great, but the implementation thereof is extremely risky, right? And that's the way that I say, simplifying it down a lot, because there are all sorts of different solutions. But in a broad argumentation, I would say that's one of the reasons why you haven't seen the adoption. It's not because it's early still, and it is still early, but it's been around for a long time, and it's being featured on CNBC, Bloomberg, left, right, and center. Do you think that there are people that are sitting there, and you need to ask yourself the question? Look at JP Morgan, right? Onyx. It would be quite simple in order to use an open source technology in order to build their entire tech stack. You need to ask yourself the question, why not? Yes, you maybe need to make it EVM compatible because this is currently where the money pot sits of like $3 trillion. But is there a bigger pie to go after? My argument would be yes. But that requires a different set of tools and a different set of technology. And that's what Concordium is built for.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's early, but it's also not early because, as you mentioned about AI, people have been trying to build AI for decades now. But in terms of the meta of AI, it's really only been around a couple of years, since GPT-3 perhaps. And so, and onboarding hundreds of millions of customers and people into AI and LLM usage and whatnot. And so you might say, yeah, we're still early, but we're early in the sense of maturity, I think, not in the sense of how long we've been around, because we've been around long enough to have made far more of a dent, I think, than we have. And my hope is that things like what you're building will actually kind of will be that catalyst or enzyme to actually make that change happen. I'm wondering, how are you going about doing that? I know you've integrated with Ledger. Are you thinking about going to blockchain infrastructure, going to banks, going to regulators, people in governments in different jurisdictions, going to big business who might be able to, or big tech that might actually benefit from the tools that you're building? or you're more building it and then just trying to demonstrate the use case and seeing who comes to build on you? How are you thinking about the actual rollout of, or onboarding, I should say, of not just people, but whole ecosystems into your infrastructure?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. I mean, first and foremost, if you Google it and you see Concordium Ledger and ConcordiumBitcoin.com, it's another one that we've announced a week ago or something, a week and a half ago. It's quite simple. Strategically, in a crypto native world, what's the point of, Boris and Concordium trying to pick a fight with Ethereum and Solana? There's no point, right?
Sure.
If you're thinking of distribution, and you have, let's take Ledger as an example, right? An amazing company run by Pascal, like an amazing company, and been around for a long time, battle tested, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, they're known as the USB stick in a safe.
Oh.
They've got 25% of global crypto sitting on ledgers. Now, what they also see is all sorts of different wallets popping up, right? If you can figure out a way of mobilizing their user base in order to start to interact on a daily basis with, for example, the industries that I mentioned, gambling, adults, whatever, you not only create a use case for stablecoins ultimately for the verify and pay angles, etc., but ultimately for you to interact in a way where you have an identity as a password, as simple as that, to verify and access things, right? Why not use a ledger for it? So when people see this, they basically, sometimes kind of brush over this and go like, okay, Concordium and the PLTs, like those protocol level tokens, which are like the, whatever, we have like 10 issuers, which have decided to issue on Concordium, even though Solana gives them, $5 million worth of grants, and they still want to do it on Concordium. You kind of need to ask yourself again the question why. But those partnerships are interesting because it kind of creates an ecosystem extremely fast, right?
Sure.
Those are joint go-to-markets. Those are partnerships, meaning that you integrate the technology in order to allow your strategic vision to come to life, right? Same for Bitcoin.com. Those guys have 75 million users, mainly in the gambling space, like online casinos. They're massive in that. So ultimately what we do is like we solve a problem for them. For us, it's great because the ecosystem grows. For the stablecoin issuers on Concordium, it's great because they're getting used and you see TVL. So those are the reasons for that developments. Again, thinking of the fact that if I basically go down the route and say as easy as, and I just take this as an example, you rock up and you say your identity being yours and it should only be yours. And if you currently speak to your banks, you maybe hear like this, create your voice as a password, which is stupid in the time of AI, but like fair enough, this shows like
idiotic
how advanced banks are, right? So basically what you then see is that you can rock up and you say you travel and you would like to log in, in the hotel room and you're tired after a day of meetings and you see the Netflix logo on your TV and you go like, I would like to log into this. Why don't you log in with your identity by signing a transaction on chain that proves on a zero knowledge proof basis that it's you and only you? And the room next to you can't do this because it's not you. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. Oh man.
So suddenly you have a use case, meaning that you actually attract a new set of users to a Web3 ecosystem whereby you don't push the narrative constantly of download my wallet, get some ETH for gas, and then go down the route of some DeFi stuff. Like, don't push that anymore. Just very simply get them in for the purpose of actually solving a problem for them that they currently have, right? Without flogging them crypto. Like, forget that for a second. Once people get comfortable in order to interact in this ecosystem, you can then go down the route in order to cross and upsell them. Go for your life, right? You're a new user because you have your cousin has been doing extremely well in some online casino. Go and download the Bitcoin.com wallet in order to verify that you're over 18 without having your identity bare ass out in the ecosystem. The idea of you verifying once in terms of like the onboarding and being able to, in a fully privacy-preserving way, interact in an entire ecosystem is a quite strong narrative in a digital age that we live in, right?
Especially in the age of AI agents and deepfakes and whatnot. Holy moly, man! This is again, I think, a necessity in the age in which we live.
in many ways, I would love that we would have had this podcast in like a week or two. But at the end of the day, if you ultimately think of, what you could consider proof of humanity, or that you have agents, agentic payments is another one, right? The use case is wonderful, right? I'm a lover of decent wine. So I could have a camera in my flippin' wine fridge, which there are thousands of those products around, a smart wine fridge that basically says, oh, you're running very low on Chavara de la Sala or whatever, right? But right now the price is a little bit high at that merchant. As soon as the prices come down, my agent could trigger and just pay the merchant and the wine gets delivered.
Yeah.
It's such a logical solution and where you actually have AI help you. But on what blockchain will you be able in order to do that verification and that payment thing? Concordium. So those are problems that you need to build for away from this, crypto hype. I'm not saying that I want to be part of that. Concordium wants to be part of that. Don't get me wrong. It's just the entrance is via a different angle. Sure. It's not by knocking at the front door and beg Ethereum and Solana to let me in.
Yeah.
It's by rocking up and say, hey, ETH and Sol, do you guys want some users? Right? Yeah. So the idea, for example, that we had a hackathon about a week ago with like 100 developers. You will see us online as one of the chains that has the highest developer adoption right now, because there is a lot of shit that is being built. Yeah. And we can be the chain that also verifies Ethereum and Solana. So in your ERC transaction from A to B, integrate your verifiable credential on Concordium that basically says identity is like that ETH wallet belongs to me. Mm-hmm. I'm making Ethereum compliant overnight, as an example.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to do the same. I'm trying to add on, which is what I would love to see, because like I say, I said this at the beginning, I'm very disappointed of how the industry has evolved. And I understand why they do it, because it's a pure business decision, right?
Sure, yeah.
You basically start a new project, you need to go where the money is, correct? Like Concordium has been around for a long time. And if you look at the chart, for example, it hasn't been doing that great. It's still around though. People again need to ask themselves the question, why? 99% of those projects that have that type of performance die a horrible death. We're not.
Boris, 2025 has been a very volatile year. One of the most uncertain, perhaps in recent memory at least. Do you have a fearless forecast for 2026 or a couple? Where do you think we're going? Maybe you can zoom out to the world. You can zoom in on Concordium. You can I don't know, just have a look at the crypto sphere. Where do you think we're going 2026? Or what are you most looking forward to or most looking to, even if you're not looking forward to it?
I mean, people are going to be, people are concerned right now of like what's going on. For me, is like, it's always I always find those panics very, very interesting, because it's stupid in many ways. Coming back to what we have discussed right at the beginning, with like what happened in 2022 or what happened in 2018. Like in 18, it was ICO fraud. In 2022, it was infrastructure collapsing. Also partially because of fraud. If you think of Celsius and all this stuff, right? Mm-hmm. This time there is nothing. And you kind of, so what I'm seeing is, number one, if things are, moving up, they have to come down from time to time, because people are just raking in some profits, and that's just good for you because you have a great entry again. I think 2026 is going to be a great year. I don't think the 4-year cycle is broken in any ways. Actually, the contrary. It's just like, a reset of leverage being flushed out, and people trying to understand of like, people asking the right questions as well. Like I'm seeing this more and more, where it's not just there anymore of like going, what's the next 1000x? It's more of like, what exactly are you building? What exactly do you have? Why would I? And I see this from the issuers first and foremost, from a Concordium perspective, right? They go like, wow, finally somebody built it. Yes, happy to come on board. I understand that you can't give out grants like Solana or all the other big chains, but we want to build on you because you actually solve a problem for us. So that product market fit existed now for the entirety of this year. So what I do see the next year, I think, is very fast. We will see more regulatory clarity in small incremental steps. If people think that the regulatory framework is going to be solved by Q3 2026 is smoke and crack, right? That's not going to happen.
Sure.
But it will be incremental, and you will ultimately see the projects that actually building the correct stuff to gain the traction. And it's not going to be this parabolic stuff anymore, but at the end of the day, you can't do, the market does what the market does. What I would like, at the same time, you will see a lot of things crash and burn. And I'm actually looking forward to that, because not because of like the impact of like people and everything, but at the end of the day, it's like cleansing. It's a cleansing of a market that, in my opinion, is extremely overcrowded. And the matter of the fact that, fart coin can have the valuation that it has is just beyond me, right? So I'm not saying, and I understand it from a pure speculative perspective, and it has proven its capability of tokenizing whatever the hell you want and making something out of it.
Sure.
And that's great. But what you will see over the course of 2026 and beyond, and I'm more having like a 5-year horizon, is that you will actually see blockchain technology being used. And I'm deliberately stepping away from the word crypto, because crypto is just an application.
Sure.
I'm more interested in I'm interested in the core technology layer. And I think the way that Charles Hoskinson, which is, him and Lars are actually good friends. He has put this very, very interesting. People should Google that. I don't know where it is, but it's basically the trinity of buzzwords.
Right.
The people that are able, in order to implement blockchain technology, AI, and quantum computing in a usable way, are going to be the biggest companies in the world. And whoever is going to be the first one to do this would also require blockchain technology to be adopted, which just makes sense, even if you just want to tokenize receipts, right? But at the end of the day, those are the ones. And I think we will enter an era where we will see finally adoption, not on the grand scale of like, the people that I've been sitting on the panel with and drawing mortgages from DeFi pools. I'm not saying that. Yeah. I'm saying adoption of blockchain technologies into the day-to-day life. And ultimately, what I think is going to be one of the biggest hindering blocks, but like my partner from Copper, Dimitri, is building things like, wallets that actually solve from a tooling perspective to strip away the fear of simple things like mnemonic seed phrases, because that's how you get adoption. If you need to explain to people of why you need to plot down 24 words, and if you lose them, you're screwed, or your money's gone. It's not something, it's very simple. If people going, I'm not going to touch this. So if you're able to solve for tooling, you build a technology stack like we are doing, and I'm seeing more and more projects wanting to do what we do, but from a cryptographic perspective, it's extremely complex and takes a long time. Like, that's why we've been around now for nearly 8 years, from inception to like, drawing the white paper and actually starting coding to TGE and beyond. You will see adoption. And I hope if we are successful here, you will see the adoption in a way happening without you actually realizing it.
Sure.
Because you will become part of an ecosystem that is away from all the complexities that crypto currently poses, strips away the risks, and subsequently allows you to interact in a very, first and foremost, the way that we position it, in a privacy-preserving way, which I think is important, whatever you interact online with, and subsequently allow you to pay, which I think is the core use case of why crypto exists in the first place. And as simple as, good luck to Stripe and good luck to everybody that is trying to do things right now. But if you think of time value of money, you will know that Concordium is going to rule that side of the world in terms of like providing you with the infrastructure. Because it's a wonderful conversation to have if you rock up to institutions the way that we do right now and say, like, this is what you can do by using Concordium. They go, great, how much is it? It's for free. You just go to GitHub and use it. Yeah, that's what I see happening over the course of the next like 3 to 5 years. 2026, I think, is going to be a good year for crypto still, because 2025 was a pretty bad one. It wasn't great. So yeah.
Yeah, man. I think you nailed it earlier. You talked about, when your auntie or cousin or whatever, when they can use crypto as easy as they can use Apple Pay, for example, the double click on the side of the phone, and they're not even realizing that they're using crypto or blockchain. They don't have to share their identity
exactly. Nor do they understand it, because that's the most important part. Even if it's their fiat balance, they do not understand how it works behind the scenes.
For sure.
They do not. So the matter of the fact that you now have your online apps and everything's in apps, etc. Like, the biggest transition was for my father not to rock up to hotel receptions anymore and trying to build with a stack of cash, right?
Yeah.
Because like, what do you mean I can't do this anymore? It's like, no, it's just like, it doesn't exist anymore.
Doesn't exist.
So
yeah.
It's kind of for me, it's a very logical thing. But at the same time, you need to have the tools to do it. And I don't think they exist at scale right now, which is, what we solve for.
Yeah, man. Boris, if someone wants to hear more from you or find out more about Concordium, about how to build with you, about how to use it, or just an interested person who's keen to see, how you're actually solving the user adoption problem, how can they find you online?
Sure, please. We're everywhere. Concordium Net on X. There is a very fast growing community now. We're on Telegram. Go to concordium.com. You'll see the entire roadmap, also all the necessary links to, GitHub, etc., to the entire ecosystem. There is 1,000 ways to find us. And if the message that we kind of portray to you, and ultimately you being able to see it, because that's another thing, we're not a project that is like, we plan to do. This shit is live. So all you need to do is use it. There are on all socials, on the homepage, and, just get in touch. And we're very, very happy to chat and figure out what we can do together.
Good on you, Boris. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Off Chain. We love bringing you great guests like Boris, and hope we've inspired you to learn more about Web3, about technology, about the future, and how you might be a part of building it with us. As always, please like, subscribe, or better yet, share this episode with a friend. Help us spread the word, and join us again next week for another exciting episode of Off Chain with me, Don Redden. Until then, take care.